Welcome, everybody, to the Big Sky Now podcast. I am the host, Josh Amick. As always, we have Fritz, John, Mark, and Ian here on our panel. Not too much exciting for week one. As expected, a lot of FBS, FCS matchups. But, Fritz, I want to talk to you. I know Oregon and Idaho was probably the one shocking game as far as matchups are concerned. So what do you think stood out to you in week one?
That was one of the big ones. The Vandals are well coached. And I know they lost their quarterback to from last year, Giovanni McCoy, to Oregon State, but they put together a good game plan. I think that India's coaching tree continues to pay off for other schools. That kind of had Oregon on the ropes a little bit. I know Idaho lost their quarterback to a broken collarbone, so now they got to switch quarterbacks again. But that's one of the games that stood out to me is the Big Sky is still a very viable, strong, powerful FCS conference.
I was thinking, not a shocker, but just kind of a pleasant surprise with Eastern Washington handling Monmouth. They played some defense on Thursday, which they hadn't played in a couple of years, and then they had their usual explosive offense with Kikoas, Vesperis, and stuff like that. So I think they're a team to watch this year, which seems kind of funny to say because Eastern should usually be a team to watch in this league. But and I'm sure Ian might talk about it a little more. The other one was maybe Idaho State hanging with Oregon State. I know it wasn't as close as Idaho and Oregon, but it wasn't a 50 burger like some of those matchups turn out to be.
Yeah, Mark must have taken a look at my notes because I was also going to mention Eastern there. After Chisholm just had an incredible game. I think it was 12 catches, around 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns for him. And then Vesperis, 25 of 28 passing, around 90% completion percentage. That's not a bad start to the year. And also, like Mark mentioned, the defense had a pretty strong showing, especially in that run defense. Gave up a few more passing yards than I'm sure they would have liked, but a lot of those came late in the second half when the game was kind of out of hand. Monmouth was able to put together a couple of drives there, but a really strong start to the season for Eastern there.
That kind of surprised me out of the gate, just how they were able to kind of deter Sone Ento running game from Monmouth. I mean, Monmouth came out kind of throwing the ball. It's almost like they didn't read the scouting report on the Eastern rushing defense from years past, but Eastern definitely did step up in that game defensively. I'd also kind of agree with Mark with Idaho State, seeing them jump out and take a lead in that first half against Oregon State, especially getting to go up against, I guess maybe they hadn't seen him in the past few years since he'd been injured in those Idaho State games. But Giovanni McCoy's first start at Oregon State, it kind of shocked me to see the Bengals get out to that good start and hang with the Beavers.
And to kind of circle back to kind of the game of the week that was expected to be the biggest blowout. I believe at one point Oregon got up to 7 touchdown favorites, almost 49 points, and they ended up winning by 10 at home. Mark, kind of in your expertise, what did you think really was the difference for the Vandals? I know their rushing defense looked like they stood Oregon pretty well. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I think we knew going in that they had a good defense, but a really good defense, and especially at their level, the thing you don't know is how that defense is going to hold up against a Power 5 school. A lot of times they just kind of get out athleted after a while, but they seem to keep Oregon. I was going to say in check. I don't know if they kept them in check. They gave up 500 yards almost, but they did kind of keep the ball in front of them. They didn't let Oregon. The plan was to not let Oregon beat them deep and get big plays, and they kind of did that. And then Oregon kind of got greedy a little bit like Oregon does, and they went for it, fourth down a couple times in their own territory, and Idaho stopped them. So that was very, really impressive. And obviously we talked about Fritz mentioned Jack Lane breaking his collarbone, and now that kind of leaves it for Jack Wagner, who played a little bit in that game. He played a little bit I think last year against Idaho State when Jack Lane started. So that's we'll see how he does.
I mean, when Oregon marches down the field on their first drive and scores a touchdown, you kind of get the feeling like, okay, this is kind of going how you might expect it to go. But I mean, just the kind of just seeing how Idaho fought and stayed in that game, even when they're down 2 touchdowns early, A couple of really big momentum plays. I mean, that flea flicker was awesome. It looks like me when I played the college football game. I love running that play. Um, Obviously, it didn't turn out in their favor at the end. A couple of miscues, especially on that was it the offsides or on fourth down late in the game with Oregon in the red zone. That kind of stands out as one of the really key plays in that one. But I mean, even if I know lost their quarterback, but you got to like to see how the rest of the team played in that one week one of the season.
If you looked at just the stats, you'd think that Oregon won this game by 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, like they were supposed to. I mean, they outgained them 487 to 217, 31 first downs for the Ducks to just 10 for Idaho. They had nearly 40 minutes of possession in the game. They just kind of shot themselves in the foot at different times. They a couple of turnovers, a missed field goal. So just first half plays that kind of kept the game close at that point, and then like Ian mentioned, the flea flicker, pulling out the bag of tricks to get onto the board, and that kind of put that sense of doubt into everybody's head at Autzen for that game. Just kind of watching it, you kind of sense the worry. So them being able to then cut it down to 3 at 17-14, the Ducks had to go out there and put together a drive. And basing it off of what Mark said too, the Vandals did a great job of keeping the ball in front of them. They forced Oregon to make short passes. I mean, 41 of 49 for can't think of his name right now.
Dylan
For
Gabriel.
Oregon. Yeah, Dylan Gabriel. That they threw the ball a lot, but they didn't give up the big play. 41 passes for 380 yards is under 10 yards per play. So they did a good job of not allowing that over the top ball that Oregon likes to get.
Yeah, you make a lot of good points. I thought with Jack Lane having a couple of fumbles and the interception, I thought maybe things go a little bit differently if they're not playing behind the ball so much. Fritz, do you have anything you want to add on to this game?
Seems like that was going on around the conference. When you look at who's coming in this week, looking ahead to when we're going to talk about the Grizz. Iowa State had its hands full with North Dakota, and just a couple plays here and there, and you might be talking about a different outcome, a stunning upset.
Yeah, and one of the other matchups we kind of had circled last week was UC Davis going against Cal. UC Davis kept it close in the first half, and then the second half, Cal outscored them 17-0. What do you think went wrong for the Aggies in that game, Ian?
I mean, going on that 5-minute touchdown drive and then immediately having Cal get on the board with that kickoff return for a touchdown is certainly not a way to keep the momentum going, especially losing the ball on fourth down, their ensuing drive after that. And then just the 2 interceptions in the third quarter certainly didn't help them in that effort as well. So, I mean, just those things kind of combined with each other, one after another, really sealed that game in Cal's favor.
Yeah, John, what stood out to you in that game against Cal? You think Cal just ended up being the better FCS team at the end or FBS team at the end, or do you think UC Davis kind of dropped the ball?
UC Davis did pretty much everything that they needed to stay in the game and put themselves in position to win. They, just like Ian mentioned, though, the turnovers in the second half. I mean, 3 interceptions. It's not going to turn out very well when you're going up against an ACC opponent, a Power 5 opponent like Cal. So you need to win the turnover battle at that point, and the Davis just wasn't able to handle that.
Yeah, the outcome was what I expected. It was 14-30 at halftime, and Cal did house a kickoff return in the first half. And then one thing I did notice, enjoy looking up, they gave up, UC Davis gave up the ball inside the 5-yard line on downs, as John mentioned, but then they got a scoop and score from Porter Connors, and that's what led to them being down just a point at halftime, and then it got away from the second half. Then Porter Connors, I was like, is that related to Rex Connors? And I looked him up, and he looked exactly like Rex Connors. That's because he's a twin. So UC Davis still has some great players on defense. They get things lined out on special teams and offense. Watch out.
John, that's going to take some getting used to. And you said that Cal was an ACC team, so
no doubt.
Yeah, that's very true. It's still doesn't seem real.
Yeah, like everybody else said, they talked the 2 turnovers obviously hurt UC Davis in the second half, and then sometimes in those games, kind of like Idaho led Cal at the half last year, and then Cal's big play, their receivers and their big play athletes kind of took over in the second half, and that could have been the case in this one too, where they just the better athletes just take over late in the game.
Yeah, one of the other matchups we all thought was Montana versus Missouri State. Montana was favored. They're at home. Prince, you were at that game. Do you think it really went the way you kind of expected, or did you think Montana would have a little bit easier of a matchup?
Well, I thought it might have gone a little bit easier, but then as the game went on, it quickly became apparent that they didn't have Junior Bergen on offense or special teams, and they didn't have Riley Wilson on defense, and Cole Grossman, who sat out all last season, wasn't available. So they're a little bit short of some bullets. And then the other part of it was Mo State has a good quarterback. I really like that guy. And then their running back runs about as hard as anybody you'll see at this level. Jacario Wright, he was tough, had a tough tackle. And between those two, third and long didn't seem like impossible at all for the Bears. So I think it's a credit to the Grizz that even though things didn't go their way, they had a crucial muff punt here, and they were behind for a good part of the game, and they really had a disadvantage in time of possession. But then when it got down to mid third quarter on, they kind of took command, which is kind of a hallmark of a Bobby Hauck team.
All right, John, you being the other Montana grad, what did you think about this game?
Yeah, I kind of like what Fritz said initially. Just it's not you very definitely noticed Bergen missing from the team, especially on special teams. I mean, just on that first punt with Drew Deck muffing it set them behind the ball. It was not ideal, of course, for the team. But I saw some issues with the rushing defense. But like Fritz said, it was a great running back that they're going up against. It just seemed like they were hit and miss. There was some missed gaps that weren't filled that gave up big runs, and the passing defense seemed to struggle with the scramble drill. So I think that's going to be another thing that they need to work at. Like Fritz said, third and longs were pretty easily achievable. It seemed like once the quarterback got out of the pocket, it was kind of a free for all. So that's also difficult in any sense of the game. But I think the biggest question is going to be the quarterback. What happens with Ayat and Logan Fife coming up this next week? I think that should be an interesting one to see.
Yeah, it seemed to me like it was one of the closer looking matchups of the ones last week going in. So I wasn't too surprised it was that close, in part because, the Grizz are breaking in a new quarterback. And then, Fritz can talk about how good those two were in that game, but they're both, fairly new, and, one's real new. And then to see they didn't have Bergen, I don't know is he out for a while, or is he going to be, or was this just the only game he was going to miss?
Good question. No, in fact, at the post-game press conference, today's press conference, the weekly press conference, nobody asked, and I was too busy writing to pay attention Saturday night. It's Bergen was in and out of a non-contact jersey in fall camp. He was out of it last practice I saw, so I was surprised he wasn't in there. He's missed a few games in his career. I think they probably need him sooner than later. UND is really good, and but yeah, I was surprised not to see him on the field, and as well as Riley Wilson.
Yeah, hopefully we get a couple of updates on those guys. That is obviously a huge loss for the Grizz. Ian, you got anything else you want to add to that game? Anything stood out to you?
Yeah, both Fritz and John mentioned the third downs. Obviously, Missouri State was able to convert a couple of pretty long third downs, especially in that third quarter or in that first half, and spread around the third and fourth quarter as well. And Montana had a little bit of struggles on third down. Had to settle for a couple field goals, especially in that second quarter. But kind of hard to predict the first game, so especially coming into a new year. So I didn't really have too much anticipation into how exactly I thought I was going to go. So, but good to see the Grizz got the win.
Yeah, that's pretty much everything I have for this week's episode of Big Sky Now. But starting this time for the first time ever, look forward to Thursday where we'll break down the upcoming week's games. And we'll get started off with our picks next week when John Allen, who is a perfect 13-0 on the season, going to see if he can keep his streak alive. But for this episode of Big Sky Now, I want to thank my panel as always. I've been your host, Josh Amick. Thanks for tuning in.